working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. Joining me today is our EBC Bangkok Thailand Bureau, Gila. Hello, Gila.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, Alma. And good afternoon to all the viewers. This is Gila Pablo from EBC Thailand Bureau, and I will be giving you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. At least 18 people died and more than a dozen are missing after floods submerged homes in central Vietnam and rough seas capsized fishing boats, according to authorities, as another storm threatened fresh downpours.
New type of alternative state quarantine, or ASU, will be implemented in the Thai government that will allow tourists to travel to certain areas during their 14-day quarantine period instead of being in their hotel rooms.
The World Health Organization chief warned against just allowing the new coronavirus to spread in the hope of achieving the so-called herd community or herd immunity, saying it was unethical.
As coronavirus cases surge, Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon, unveils a new happy COVID quarantine center. With floods in and daily parts of Vietnam, the country is preparing for another storm. Let's hear more from Eliana Kate Sebastian. Eliana?
Good afternoon, Gila. Here is an update from VN Express International. Vietnam prepares for another storm as Storm Nangka evolved from a tropical depression on Monday afternoon that is to hit straight northern and north-central Vietnam. Nangka first became visible a day after Storm Linfa made landfall in central Vietnam on Sunday morning. According to the National Center for Hydrometeorological Forecasting, as of 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Nangka lay about 430 kilometers to the east-northeast of Vietnam's Paracel Islands with a maximum wind speed of 75 kilometers per hour. By this time, Tuesday, the storm center is expected to be above the eastern area of China's Hainan Island with a maximum speed of 100 kilometers per hour. Its center is expected to be above waters of northern and north-central Vietnam by 1 o'clock in the afternoon Wednesday, having a maximum wind speed of 100 kilometers per hour. Similar predictions were made by the Hong Kong Observatory and the Japan Meteorological Agency. They predicted that Nangka would move west-northeast and the storm center would be above sea regions in northern and north-central Vietnam at around 1 p.m. on Wednesday, but with a maximum wind speed of 83 to 85 kilometers per hour. Nangka is the seventh storm to form on the South China Sea, which Vietnam calls the East Sea this year. Linfa, the sixth storm which grew from tropical turbulence, combined with a cold spell, had caused heavy rains that triggered floods and landslides in central Vietnam. At least 21 people have been reported dead, while 14 are reported missing. After making landfall Sunday morning, Linfa quickly reverted into a tropical depression. For COVID-19 updates, the National Steering Committee for COVID-19 Prevention and Control reported that the number of cases in Vietnam remained at 1,110. On this day, Vietnam entered its 40th day of zero community transmission. Back to you, Gila.
Thank you so much, Eliana. Thank you for the update. Stay safe and healthy as always.
Thank you, Gila. This is Eliana Faith Sebastian reporting live from Da Nang, Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
In related news, at least 18 people died and more than a dozen are still missing after floods submerged homes in central Vietnam and rough seas capsized fishing boats, according to authorities, as another storm threatened fresh downpours. Take a look. Images on state media showed entire villages underwater in Quang Tri and Quang Nam, while murky floodwaters swept through the imperial city of Hue and the tourist hotspot of Hoi and Hoi An over the weekend. More than 100,000 homes have been submerged in the floods and nearly 46,000 people evacuated, according to Vietnam's Disaster Management Authority. Among the dead are 3 fishermen, however, and 3 others are missing. Vietnam is frequently lashed by harsh weather in the rainy season between June and November, with Central Coast areas most vulnerable. The country is bracing for another storm rolling in from the South China Sea, as our EBC correspondent in Vietnam said, with heavy rains again expected. Some 132 people were reported dead or missing due to natural disasters in Vietnam last year, according to the General Statistics Office.
UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric said Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez told the meeting of the Coalition in Finance Ministers for Climate Action that the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic is a dress rehearsal for the even greater climate emergency faced by all nations.
The Secretary General addressed via video message the 4th meeting of the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. He said the pandemic is a dress rehearsal for the even greater climate emergency faced by all nations, and told ministers that their recovery plans will determine the course for the next 30 years. The Secretary General said the world needs finance ministers to align COVID recovery and stimulus plans with the goals of the Paris Agreement and to end fossil fuel subsidies, invest in green jobs, and not bail out polluting industries. Been a dramatic rise in disasters over the last 20 years, explained by a rise in climate-related disasters, including extreme weather events. In the last 20 years, has seen the number of major floods more than double. The report also records major increases in storms, drought, wildfires, and extreme temperature events. Over the last 20 years, major recorded disaster events claim 1.23 million lives, impacting 4.2 billion people, many on more than one occasion, resulting in approximately almost $3 trillion in global economic losses.
And Malaysia announced sweeping new curbs around Kuala Lumpur and worst-hit Sabah State as it fights a new surge in coronavirus infections. Joining us live from Kuala Lumpur, here's Gail Aldos. Hello, Gail.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon, and to all the viewers. Here is the latest news here in Malaysia. The Senior Minister of Security Cluster, Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, announced yesterday, October 12, through a virtual conference via the official Facebook site of the Ministry of Defense, that the government will be implementing the Conditional Movement Control Order, CMCO, for the state of Selangor and the federal territories of Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya here in West Malaysia. Ismail Sabri said the CMCO will be effective from 12:01 a.m. on October 14, Wednesday, which will last for 2 weeks until October 27, Tuesday. Because of the CMCO, all school levels and higher learning institutions, public parks, recreational and entertainment centers, pubs and clubs will be closed, including mosques, suraus, and non-Muslim places of worship, and as well as sports and cultural activities will also be banned from occurring. Ismail Sabri also stated that the maximum of 2 people from one household will only be allowed to leave the house to purchase necessities. Meanwhile, traveling across districts will not be allowed, but workers needing to cross districts will need to show evidence of a work pass or letter of approval from their employer. On the other hand, economic, industry, and manufacturing activities will still continue to operate in Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, and Putrajaya and must follow standard operating procedures. And on to the COVID-19 updates. According to the COVID-19 portal website by the Ministry of Health, As of October 12 yesterday, there was a total of 563 cases in the country, with 2 deaths recorded. This number of cases is the second highest currently recorded, with the highest recorded on October 6, with 691 cases. Out of the 563 cases, only 1 was an import case, while the remaining 562 local transmission cases comprised of 498 Malaysians and 64 foreign nationalities. With this new number of cases, the total cumulative COVID-19 cases in Malaysia has now reached a total of 16,220, with active cases now at more than 5,000 at 5,039. Currently, there are 98 patients who are in the intensive care unit and 29 of them needing respiratory support. Furthermore, the total number of deaths has now reached 159, with the 2 new deaths recorded. Meanwhile, the total recovered is now at 11,022, with 109 recoveries as of yesterday. That's all from me. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Gail, when you say conditional movement control order, what does that mean?
People are not allowed to leave their houses unless it is for necessities and for those who are required to work.
Okay. That's quite strict, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Gail, for your updates there in Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This is Gail Aldos. We live in interesting times.
And now let's move to Bangkok, Thailand. New type of alternative state quarantine, or ASQ, will be implemented by the Thai government, and that will allow tourists to travel to certain areas during their 14-day quarantine period instead of being in their hotel room. Let's get it more from Gretchen Kasad.
Yes, Gila, good afternoon. Yes, Thailand's Ministry of Public Health has proposed for new type of alternative state quarantine, or ASQ, for short-term tourists, which is another way to stimulate the economy. The new type of ASQ allows the tourists to travel in the selected areas during their 14-day quarantine in some designated provinces. However, Chile, the new ASQ must be informed and approved by the residents of the provinces and must be based on safety and economic viability. Here are the terms and the conditions for the foreign visitors. Tourists must come from countries with low risk of COVID-19 and no local infection for 3 months. And tourists must also be negative for the COVID-19 in 72 hours before the departure and stay in home quarantine for 14 days before departing their country. Tourists also must book their flights and accommodation via travel agencies. And there are also recommended some activities like massage, spa, and gastronomic tours. They must book also hotels with safety and health administration standards. And tourists are required to use the tracking devices with representatives of agencies responding to COVID-19 traveling with them at all times. On the other hand, the selected eligible tourism provinces for the new type of ASQ are Chonburi, Buriram, Rayong, Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, Phuket, and Surat Thani. According to the Director General of the Health Service Support Department, Thailand is ready to take international travelers from October 15 onwards. Back to you, Gila.
Thank you so much, Gretchen, for the update. Stay safe and healthy.
Reporting from Bangkok, Thailand, this is Gretchen Kusad said, we live in interesting times.
The Department of Health on Monday said enclosed and indoor spaces must have proper ventilation and more exhaust fans to prevent COVID-19 transmission. In a report in the Business Mirror, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere said that the department memorandum DM 2020-0429 was issued to address possible administrative and engineering controls by encouraging ventilation to mitigate COVID-19. Ms. Vergere said in an online media forum, in comfort rooms, there should be exhaust fans, and these should be kept open continuously as much as possible. She also advised those who are using cars to use natural ventilation and open their windows. She also advised those who are using cars to open their windows, use natural ventilation. The World Health Organization chief warned against just allowing the new coronavirus to spread in the hope of achieving so-called herd immunity, saying it was unethical. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus cautioned against calls in some countries to let COVID-19 run its course until enough people develop the immunity needed to naturally halt its spread. Let's listen in.
Allowing a dangerous virus that we don't fully understand to run free is simply unethical. It's not an option. In most countries, less than 10% of the population have been infected with the COVID-19 virus. Letting the virus circulate unchecked, therefore, means allowing unnecessary infections, suffering, and death. Around the world, we're now seeing an increase in the number of reported cases of COVID-19, especially in Europe and the Americas. Each of the last 4 days has been the highest number of cases reported so far.
But what we are beginning to see worryingly in places like France, like the UK, Ireland and other countries, is hospitalisation rates increasing, ICU occupancy rising, and it's really important that health systems are able to cope with what will be an increasing number of cases in hospital and ICUs over the coming weeks.
Especially in Europe and the Americas.
For measles, for instance, it's estimated that if 95% of the population is vaccinated, the remaining 5% will also be protected from the spread of the virus. For polio, meanwhile, the threshold is estimated at 80%. Dr. Tedros said relying on naturally obtaining herd immunity in such a situation would be scientifically and ethically problematic. Here in the Philippines, members of the House of Representatives on Tuesday formally ratified the election of Marinduque Representative Lord Alan Velasco as the new speaker. During a plenary session inside the Batasang Pambansa complex in Quezon City, a total of 186 lawmakers voted to ratify Velasco's election as the House's top leader, formally replacing Taguig Pateros Representative Alan Peter Cayetano. The ratification of the election was held to remove doubts about the validity of Velasco's assumption to the speakership post after he was named as the chamber's top leader during a remote session at the Celebrity Sports Plaza in Quezon City on Monday. In a speech, Velasco noted that the 15th to 21 term sharing agreement that was brokered by President Duterte at the start of the 18th Congress last year was a bond of honor stronger than any written contract. He said the rejection of the agreement is a rejection of the palabra de honor and likewise a rejection of Mayor President Duterte himself. Under the term-sharing deal brokered by President Duterte, Cayetano would serve as House Speaker for the first 15 months or until October 2020, while Velasco would take over and assume the position for the remaining 21 months or until the 18th Congress ends in 2022. However, Cayetano's move to abruptly suspend the session has prevented a speakership takeover of Velasco on October 14. Following the ratification of Velasco's election, Cayetano tendered his resignation as Speaker of the House. According to Roque, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, Duterte no longer wanted to be involved, or the president no longer want to be involved in anything that could possibly derail the passage of the proposed budget. President Duterte, through Proclamation 1027, called on the Congress to hold a special session from October 13 to 16 to resume the congressional deliberations on the proposed 2021 national budget and to avoid any further details on the prompt passage thereof in accordance with the Constitution and applicable laws, rules, and regulations. On Monday, 186 lawmakers voted to elect Velasco as the new speaker in a session at the Celebrity Sports Plaza in Quezon City, ousting incumbent Cayetano. An hour after, Cayetano's office released a manifesto showing 200 lawmakers backing his continued leadership. Now, Cayetano's manifesto contains 200 signatories out of the 299-member House. However, 186 lawmakers voted to elect Velasco. Now, this means that there are lawmakers who voted to elect Velasco and also signed Cayetano's manifesto. Last September 30, Cayetano offered to resign if he was expected to remain as Speaker until October 14 as part of his term-sharing agreement with Velasco. Now, his move was rejected by the majority of House members. It was President Duterte who brokered a term-sharing agreement in 2019 where Cayetano would serve as Speaker until October 2020 while Velasco would supposedly take over and assume the position until the 18th Congress ends in 2022.
Except that with the problems of COVID, with the restrictions on travel, with the difficulty in establishing...
ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Talagang napapawaw ako.
Yung performance mo was very powerful, ang linis ng galaw mo.
Grabe yung connection nyo. As in, para kayo nagbabibrate papunta sa akin.
Papatunayan ng ating mga kalahok na when it comes to dancing, ay hindi laging totoo ang phrase na strength in numbers. It's their solo mission to own and dominate our TNG stage with their unique style. This is Tagisan ng Galing Part 2 Dance Edition.
It says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Final volume 450. If I want to 100%. Traffic ban. Construction eh.
Tayong mga Filipino, likas na palabati. Sanay rin tayong makipagkamay. Pero dahil na rin sa COVID pandemic, isinusulong ang pagbati na hindi na kailangan pang makipagkamay. Ang pambansang pagbati. Ito ay ang pagdampi ng kanang palad sa gitnang bahagi ng dibdib, kasabay ng bahagyang pagyukod ng ulo o paibabang tingin at pagsambit ng mga salitang nagpapahayag ng pagbati, paggalang o pagpupugay. Pagkatapos nito ay ang pag-angat ng ulo ng nakangiti at nakatingin sa mata ng pinabati. Pambansang pagbati, pagpapakita ng paggalang, kababaang loob at pagiging sensero nating mga Filipino.
Welcome back to ASEAN Focus. Meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson said Monday it had temporarily halted its COVID-19 vaccine trial because of its participants had become sick. I quote, "We have temporarily temporarily paused further dosing in all our COVID-19 vaccine candidate clinical trials, including the phase 3 Ensemble trial, due to an unexplained illness in a study participant. That's according to the company in a statement. The pause means the enrollment system has been closed for the 60,000 patient clinical trial, while the independent patient safety committee is convened. Johnson & Johnson said that serious adverse events, SAES, such as accidents or illnesses, are unexpected part of any clinical study, especially large studies. Company guidelines allow them to pause a study to determine if the SAE was related to the drug in question and whether to resume study. In September, trials on the coronavirus vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University were paused after a UK volunteer developed an unexplained illness.
In other news, China's top diplomat was in Cambodia on Monday on the start of a visit both countries hope will boost relations at a time of increased tensions with the United States. Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who will also visit Malaysia, Laos, and Thailand on a regional charm offensive, signed a trade deal that will allow Cambodia to export 340, mostly agricultural products without tariffs. Beijing has all but replaced Washington as Phnom Penh's most important international partner, with the latest example just last week when a U.S.-funded naval facility was raised as part of a new base being developed with Chinese aid. Beijing has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in Cambodia as part of its Global Belt and Road Initiative, but new bridges and roads have been offset by what locals see as Chinese appropriation of local assets and resources, such as in Sihanoukville. Bilateral trade between China and Cambodia was worth $8 billion in 2019, but this deal should push the exports up to $10 billion by 2023, according to Commerce Ministry spokesman Xiang Chai. It could also offset losses caused by the European Union reimposing customs duties on Cambodian exports in August, according to Hun Sen's spokesman Yang Sopalit.
An expert from the ASEAN Development Bank, or ADB, senior economist Paul Vandenberg, said work-from-home arrangements may continue in the new normal in light of the economic benefits to both workers and firms. In developed countries, Vandenberg noted that recent estimated showed 35% to 45% of jobs can be done at home in developed countries. The share only declines to about 10% to 30% in developing countries. In a Business Mirror report, Vandenberg said working from home benefited workers through reduced to no commuting time to go to work, while employers were able to maximize their employees. Working from home also led to reduced rental costs, allowing firms to transition to the digital spaces, reducing the need for physical space. Vandenberg said through work-from-home arrangements, employers can implement workspace sharing arrangements, such as sharing desks. This was made possible by laptops, shared file storage, and the paperless office, which was used by more firms to continue operating during the pandemic. However, it has also caused many difficulties, such as the distractions and diversions in a work-from-home setting, which was absent from the office setting, thus boosting workers' productivity.
Meanwhile, Japan is currently refusing entry to non-Japanese people who have been to any of over 150 designated countries across the world within the past 14 days, including the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, South Korea, China, and most of European countries, including the UK, except 2 foreign residents of Japan or under special circumstances. Japan is also temporarily suspending visa exemptions, with many countries making it necessary for visitors to apply for a visa before traveling to Japan. Arriving travelers who have recently visited a country affected by the coronavirus or who show coronavirus symptoms will have to take a coronavirus test at the airport and wait for the test results to arrive, which usually takes 2 to 3 hours. Furthermore, all arriving travelers, including those who didn't get tested, will have to undergo a self-quarantine at a designated location, usually at a hotel or at home, and may not use public transportation for 14 days upon arrival. Likewise, there are many countries that refuse entry to people arriving from Japan or require travelers arriving from Japan to undergo a quarantine. A gradual reopening of Japan's borders towards short-time visitors is being prepared. In a first step, a business track system was started allowing business travelers from certain countries, currently Singapore and South Korea, to skip the quarantine if they test negative once before departure and once after arrival. However, they still have to go through a time-consuming application procedure, submit a schedule of activities, install a coronavirus contact tracing app, and not use public transport for 2 weeks after arrival. And it's currently undecided when tourists will again be able to enter the country.
Fitch Ratings affirmed 5 Philippine private banks long-term issuer default ratings after noting the government's readiness to support the sector from the impact of the pandemic. These banks are the SY-led BDO Unibank Incorporated, or BDO BBB, with a stable outlook. Ayala-led Bank of the Philippine Islands, or BPI, at BBB with stable outlook. TY-led Metropolitan Bank and Trust Company, Metro Bank, at BBB with stable outlook. TAN-led Philippine National Bank, or TNB, at BB with stable outlook. And SY-led China Banking Corporation, or China Bank, at BB Plus with a negative outlook. In a commentary dated October 12, the debt rater said, "These decisions are driven by our expectations of extraordinary support from the sovereign," citing that the stable outlook on 4 of these banks mirrors that on the Philippines. He, on the other hand, said that standalone credit profilers of these financial institutions continue to be under pressure amid the steep economic downturn. This risk, it said, is also the reason for the negative outlook on China Bank. The commentary said the domestic economy is severely affected by the pandemic, as shown by the 9% contraction in the first half of the year, which is said is the worst in Southeast Asia. Fitch Ratings forecast an 8% contraction as measured by gross domestic product, or GDP, for the domestic economy this year, but it projects a 9% recovery next year due in the part of the base effect.
In other news, Mark Striegel makes his UFC debut in Abu Dhabi this weekend, having taken a path forged by centuries of feared Filipino warriors and followed by boxing great Manny Pacquiao. Take a look. Now, Mr. Striegel based himself in the cool mountain climate of Baguio City, and it paid off as he became the only Philippine-based fighter on the UFC's books. There's the high-altitude training, but there's also the history there, according to Filipino-American Striegel. "Once I'd fought there, I couldn't get myself to leave," he said. Baguio City on the northern Philippine island of Luzon has in the past hosted 8-weight world champion Pacquiao's training camps. The 32-year-old MMA bantamweight Striegel first visited Baguio a decade ago for a mixed martial arts bout. And then he met a local woman and fell in love, both with her and the popular Filipino holiday destination. Now, Mr. Striegel was born in Tokyo to an American father and Filipino mother and started out in karate and wrestling. He spent his college years in California before turning to MMA and making the Philippines his home. And Gila and I will be back with ASEAN in Focus right after this short break.
toilet paper at tissue boxes mo. Hindi mo ba alam, mauubos daw ang mga tissue products? Bakit naman? Ang raw materials daw ng mask at tissue products ay iisa lang. Saan naman galing ang balitang yan? Ay basta, narinig ko lang din. Maraming diling kayang nagpo-post sa Facebook at Twitter, kaya kung ako sa'yo, pumuha ka na din. Sige na't mauna na ako sa'yo ah.
Huwag basta-basta magpaniwala
Sa mga nakikita
o nababasa sa social media,
magsaliksik at i-verify ang lahat ng impormasyon
nakukuha sa internet.
Tandaan,
maging responsable tayo
sa paggamit ng social media
nang hindi magdulot ng panic sa iba.
Kung paanong dapat labanan ng COVID-19.
Ay gayon din ang ating pagsugpo
sa black propaganda
at maling impormasyon.
Dennis Lu,
Lou Amelda,
Vivian Alpartosa,
Tyranel Pililu,
Hannibal Arevalo,
EBC
Japan
Bureau.
We live in interesting times.
Mga kababayan, tulad ng OFW, kasa at biyaya, ang gusto sa ibang bansa. Ang iba ay di swerte, bumalik ng walang wala. Hindi mo makikita, bakas ng pagluha. Ang Pilipino, simple lang ang gusto. Basta't may kwentuhan, tawanan at kantahan. Masasayang tao, mga OFW. Anumang problema ay kayang-kaya, kahit walang pera. Okay, saya, saya. Okay, saya, saya. Tayo lahat ay masaya. Tumawa ng tumawa, dapat laging masaya. Buhay ay gaganda. Okay, saya, saya. Okay, saya, saya. Tayong lahat ay masaya. Tumalong, sumigaw, kumanta, sumayaw. Tayong lahat kaya saya, saya. Okay, saya, saya. Okay, saya, saya. Tayong lahat ay masaya. Tumawa ng tumawa, dapat laging masaya. Buhay ay gaganda. Okay, saya, saya. Okay, saya, saya. Tayong lahat ay masaya. Tumalong, sumigaw, kumanta, sumayaw. Tayong lahat kaya saya, saya. Tayong lahat kaya saya, saya.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. As coronavirus cases surge, Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon, unveils a happy COVID quarantine center with gym facilities and a library in a bid to keep those who have tested positive in a good mental state.
ဝင်လာနဲ့ပေါ့နော်ဒီစေးရုံတရုံနဲ့ဝင်လာနဲ့မတူဘဲနဲ့ပေါ့နော်ညီမတို့အနေနဲ့အသက်နိုင်ဆုံးဟိုစိတ်ကို relax ဖြစ်အောင်ပေါ့သူတို့စေးရုံကြီးတက်နေရပါလားငါလူနေမကောင်းအဲ့လိုမျိုးမခံစားရအောင်ညီမတို့အသက်နိုင်ဆုံးတော့စီစဉ်ပေးထားပါတယ်ရှင်ဟုတ်ကဲ့
Meanwhile, the third ASEAN Inclusive Business Summit convened today with government officials and business leaders advocating for inclusive business strategies that support micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, or MSMEs, to recover from economic setbacks during the COVID-19 pandemic in the Southeast Asia region. The region already faced an ambitious challenge to reach its SDG targets by 2030. There are concerns that this may be moving even further out of the reach.
Key areas.
But if these past few months have shown us anything, it is that change is certainly possible. For Southeast Asia, that change will need to be underpinned by tackling inequality, by bridging the digital divide, greening the economy, and upholding human rights and good governance practices. And these are the pillars that were identified by the United Nations Secretary General for building a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive Southeast Asia in the aftermath of COVID. So in a way, the question in front of us today is whether inclusive business can be a vital part of the transformations needed in Southeast Asia to put Southeast Asia on a path to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and in helping address the social and economic challenges posed by COVID-19. The potential is clearly there. Inclusive businesses have already been providing goods, services, and livelihoods on a commercially viable basis to people across our region that are so often left behind. Inclusive businesses are delivering essential and affordable medical services, including maternal care, to low-income groups in urban and peri-urban communities in India, and making medical consultations possible through mobile applications in Myanmar. Inclusive agri-businesses are providing increased income opportunities to tea farmers in Vietnam and rice farmers in Thailand. Inclusive businesses are also offering greener energy alternatives to low-income groups, from selling biomass cookers to remote areas in northern Vietnam, to enabling household rural electrification through solar grid systems in Cambodia. These are but a few of the examples. But beyond the examples, we see three fundamental ways in which inclusive businesses are helping to deliver a green, inclusive, and resilient ASEAN. Firstly is women's economic empowerment. By definition, inclusive businesses support those further behind and include low-income women in their value chains. Many provide income opportunities to women, often low-income women. And with women so often left behind, catalyzing women's economic empowerment is going to be critical for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and from recovering from the shock of COVID-19. Second is MSME development. The global pandemic has had a devastating impact on already vulnerable MSMEs. During the initial 2 months of the pandemic, over 60% of SMEs may have closed in the Philippines and Laos PDR, and over 40% in Thailand and Indonesia. And the Director General mentioned a few of these other figures before me in terms of the impact that MSMEs have seen. But inclusive businesses support MSMEs in their value chains, providing market access, developing skills, and facilitating access to finance. So their role in building back better is critical. Thirdly is digital transformation. The pandemic has exposed the widening digital divide between and within countries. Inclusive businesses are really born innovators. They often introduce digital innovations and in the process, enable small economic actors to benefit from digital services and build digital skills. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, inclusive businesses can certainly show the way for scaling up the role of business to do good. But for this to happen, we need innovative government policies that incentivize businesses to focus on creating social and environmental value, as well as economic value. And in this regard, ASEAN has very much shown leadership in taking action at the national level as well as at the ASEAN-wide level. But to confront the challenges of our region, we need not small change, but transformative change. So continued support for SMEs, for women entrepreneurs, and innovative business models during the Brunei ASEAN chairmanship in 2021 will be vital for continuing our inclusive business journey.
So that's what I mentioned earlier, that what we have done together with ASEAN Digital is that to help the B40, the micro enterprises, in terms of access to financing, in which it can be linked to IB agenda, as well as to help the micro enterprises to expand their businesses. Yeah. So in order to support and boost the development of IB in Malaysia, we have 5 key areas that have been identified. The first one is actually making IB a strategic objective in SME development strategy. Yeah. And IB has been recognized as a prospect to contribute and complement policies and programs supporting SME growth. And Malaysia has a strong and advanced institutional framework for SME development with a dedicated SME strategy and conforms to the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan for SME Development 2016 to 2025 that can be expanded to include IB by mainstreaming IB support in its SME framework, as well as integrating inclusive business into the SME strategy. And to align to this agenda, IB has been incorporated as one of our strategies in the National Entrepreneurship Policy 2030, which actually translate into 2 of our 6 strategic thrusts, which we actually mentioned about improving access to finance and financial inclusion for entrepreneurs and enterprises, as well as promoting social entrepreneurship, which links to the IB agenda. Yeah? And IB also now be considered to be part of the strategic recommendations under the upcoming 5-year development strategy, which is the 12th Malaysian Plan, 2021 until 2025. And this plan will ensure a more inclusive and meaningful development of the nation in line with the formation of prosperous society. In addition, we also have this Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, launched last year in October, aspires to propel the nation towards high value-added economic activities in a more inclusive manner.
Well, I'm coming from the small business sector, and we have about 900,000 MSMEs in the Philippines. And for MSMEs, usually you don't think of CSR, you don't think of corporate social responsibility. You probably don't even think of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But from our name, Echo Store, as you can see, the ECHO is capitalized. When we started 12 years ago, E was always for environment. So we were probably always thinking about climate action, albeit we were not naming it. And then C meant C was for communities, because we would source products from small communities around the country who had no market access. H, of course, is hope, is to give, the small producer the hope that they can be a sustainable business in the long run. And O is for organization, because we engage nonprofits, other NGOs, other organizations to help us in delivering goods and services from small communities to our consumers. And with COVID, as you know, we had to pivot, and we pivoted to the digital platform, because like any MSME affected, like they say 60% have closed, have shuttered. And what we had to do was close the stores in the malls, but pivoted to digital. And our MSME suppliers will continue to have that supply route towards consumers. So what we're saying is that as an SME, business does not have to be a huge corporation to be able to practice IB or inclusive business. Business can just have that heart, and that's why we call social enterprises such, because there's that social good aside from the profit. And now, of course, we highlight the environment for climate action and climate change. So in ASEAN, I think that if we're doing it in the Philippines, this is something very replicable in all the 10 ASEAN states because of our same geography. Our SMEs are counting on small businesses like ours to keep moving the agriculture, to keep moving products from farm to market. So in summary, I think small businesses like ours, like Eco Store, which is now found online, ecostore.ph, is that for all MSMEs out there all over ASEAN, you need not be big to be an inclusive business. So that's what we do.
Organized by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, or ESCAP, the Inclusive Business Action Network, or IBAN, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. The summit marked the continued commitments of the ASEAN community, including government representatives, the private sector, investors, and development organizations, to create an enabling ecosystem for inclusive business.
Thanks, Gila.
Thank you so much, Alma. Thank you so much for having me today. It's nice to be back in ASEAN in Focus. And those are the latest news around the ASEAN region. I'm Gila Pablo from EBC Thailand Bureau, and this is in interesting times.
See you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.